Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll just give it a few more seconds while people are coming in.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, hello, everyone.
Hi, welcome, everyone. Those of you who are just joining us. Hi, Elizabeth. Nice to see you again. Hi, Sally. Right, still got some people coming in. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Trish. Welcome back. Hi, John. Hello, everyone who's just joining us. Welcome. Hi, Sharon. Right. Okay, I think we've got everybody here, so we'll make a start. Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the online Naturetrek Roadshow. For those of you joining for the first time, I'm Sarah Frost, Naturetrek's marketing manager and a cruise leader. I've worked for Naturetrek for 6 years now, and I'll be your host for this evening, speaking to you from Hampshire. Now, as many of you know, we'd normally be out on the road delivering these presentations in different venues across the UK, but we're delighted to continue to be able to bring these presentations to your screens at home. And this evening has lifted the roof on our previous evenings with 500 households signed up to watch our show tonight. So we easily have 600 or 700 people watching. So a very warm welcome to all of you and a very good morning or afternoon if you're joining us from a different time zone. We've had quite a few people joining us from North America, other parts of Europe and even Australia last week. Now, if this is your first time at one of our webinars, please do just ask any questions you may have using the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. Be it questions specific to the species that we're talking about, or questions about the tour, or even questions about how the travel industry is responding to the pandemic as a whole. We're more than happy to chat about all of this. That's what we're here for. And we'll type replies to you as we can throughout the evening. But we'll also read questions out at 9:05 after the last presentation. Please also do feel very welcome to use the chat function, which lots of you have already started doing. That's great. There's been lots of chat in the previous presentation evenings this last week. I would encourage you to include all attendees when you send your messages. The default is just to send to panelists, which you can do, of course, but it creates a nice chatty atmosphere to include others. And you may be making a point which is really useful for other people. And it's an opportunity to chat to your fellow nature trekkers as well. Now, as many of you will know, our 2021 and 2022 brochure is out now. If you're on our mailing list, you should have received it already, although it's taking longer to reach some areas due to delays with posts. And it looks like this. It's great bedtime reading, and this will help chase away any lockdown blues you may have. It's full of wonderful wildlife holidays, and we hope it gives you loads to look forward to. It's the perfect excuse to pop the kettle on and put your feet up. And what a week it has been since our brochure came out. We received over 120 bookings this week, which back when we were a smaller company would signify someone going out from the office to the local shop to purchase some cream cakes for us all to celebrate. But I think tonight we can just have a celebratory drink, all viewers and speakers together in lieu to celebrate a relatively positive week in an unpleasant time, and that we have the thoughts of the good times to come firmly at the front of our minds at the moment. So that's what we're feeling positive about. If you're not on our mailing list, but you do want a brochure, then please do just email us at info@naturetrek.co.uk, and we'll be very happy to pop one in the post to you. Likewise, our website is a huge resource of information and has further details of our tours, including detailed itineraries and reports of previous holidays. So do please go online and have an explore. Finally, for any people new to Zoom, don't worry, we can't see or hear you. We have no idea if you're sitting in your best dressing gown or not. It's only the panelists that are in the spotlight. Now, few wildlife enthusiasts can resist Africa. Whether it's exploring lush jungles or arid deserts, or taking probably the most iconic wildlife holiday there is, which is of course the African safari. And for many, the thought of riding in an open-top Jeep along dusty tracks in search of Africa's bold and colourful bird life and other abundant species is one of life's best experiences. And Africa offers so many experiences, in fact, that we can't possibly cover them all in one evening. So we're running 2 additional Africa evenings, the dates for which have been released today via email and are also on our website, along with dates for 6 other evenings, the details of which will be on our screen during the interval. And in addition to its superb wildlife, Africa offers some of the very best wildlife lodges and tented camps in the world. And our expert staff know the best ones to go to provide an outstanding wildlife holiday. And joining me tonight are 4 of my colleagues and Africa experts, all of whom have spent extensive time in the countries that they're speaking about, and either living there or working there and leading tours there. And this is part of the fabric of Naturetrek tours. You're hearing from someone who's been there and done it. So do ask questions. If you want to know what equipment or clothing you should be taking with you, we're always very happy to answer such questions and advise you. So I hope you're sitting comfortably with a drink and some nibbles, and it's my pleasure to hand you over to my colleague Paul, who'll introduce himself and take us on our first tour to Tanzania. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Just bear with me 1 second while I share my screen. Hopefully that's going to work in a moment. Yes, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and as Sarah said, it's fabulous to have so many people joining us tonight. My name's Paul Stanbury. I've been with Naturetrek now since 1996, and I've been very fortunate over those years to travel widely around the world, and in particular through Africa. I look after a wide range of our tours, in particular sub-Saharan Africa, and a few areas in South America, some of our cruises as well. But without doubt, a particular love of mine is the African continent and the fabulous wildlife and landscapes that occur there. So for the first 20 minutes of this evening, I'm going to talk through Tanzania, in particular focusing on the fabulous national parks in northern Tanzania, and outlining some of the wildlife highlights and the variety of tours that we operate. So where is Tanzania? Well, it's East Africa, of course. We're here just south of the equator, and bordering Kenya, Mozambique, Zambia and the DRC. We fly into, we typically fly into Kenya, actually flying into Nairobi direct from the UK, and then taking a short flight from Nairobi across to Kilimanjaro. We have do a wide variety of tours to northern Tanzania, but they all tend to focus on the same national parks and reserves. So we're flying into Arusha, Kilimanjaro Airport. We go to Arusha National Park. We go to Tarangire to the south here, Lake Manyara National Park here, and then up into the Ngorongoro Highlands, of course, to the crater, and then down into the Serengeti National Park. So these are the key wildlife and landscape areas of northern Tanzania. Let's say a flight, the tour holiday begins with a flight to Nairobi, and then from there we're flying down. In fact, it takes about an hour to get from Nairobi down to Arusha. You pass the snowy cap of Mount Kilimanjaro en route, the highest mountain in Africa, and reaches nearly 6,000 meters in height. But once you've seen Kilimanjaro, you'll begin to descend down into Arusha. These are the sort of vehicles that we use. They're stretched land cruisers, great visibility. Everybody gets a window seat. When you're in the national park, they open the roof so you can stick your head out the roof, and so it's great for photography. Side windows open up as well, 4-wheel drive, so they're really perfect for the sorts of trips that we operate. And of course, throughout the world, we pride ourselves in bringing in the very, very best guides to show you around and to show you the wildlife. All the guides we use, be it in Tanzania or other areas of the planet, are fantastic wildlife, fantastic naturalists. They know their birds as well as their mammals, and they're just really nice, friendly, chatty, easygoing people as well. So the guides really make our tours, and we've got some great guides in Tanzania who drive the vehicle, point out the birds and the wildlife, and look after you when you're out there. And on some of our trips, we also send out a UK tour leader as well to accompany you from the UK. After a couple of nights in Arusha, just to unwind and relax from the flight, we typically drive about 3 hours down to Tarangire National Park. Tarangire covers about 2,600 square kilometers of bush surrounding the Tarangire River. And in the dry months of the year, the water levels are down, and the river attracts a whole wonderful variety of wildlife. It's one of the few permanent water sources in the park, and so there's a magnet for the local mammals and other wildlife. Is elephant land, and you're going to see lots of elephants on your time here. As with all our visits to the national park, typically you're getting up at first light. You have a coffee and a snack, then you head out on a morning safari. You're back for a late breakfast, brunch, siesta in the afternoon, and then out again mid-afternoon into the evening, as these are the best times for the animals and the birds, and the time of day when it's that little bit cooler and you're going to see a lot more. There are lots of giraffes as well in Tarangire. It's a common animal you'll see throughout your stay. This is a male with the lump on the top of the head. Loads of birds as well. Of course, Africa is blessed with some of the most diverse and wonderful bird life anywhere in the world. And East Africa in particular is very, very rich in birds. It's impossible. It would take me an entire 20 minutes to give you a brief flavour of the sort of bird life you'll see. But some of the key species, we've got white-headed buffalo weaver here. It's a common bird in Tarangire. The aptly named superb starling, a wonderful iridescent bird, iridescent blue on the back, bright orange on the underpart, one of a family of glossy starlings that occur throughout Africa, really spectacular birds. From one of the most beautiful to one of the least beautiful, the wonderful marabou stork, but they have a very, very important role in Africa. They're scavengers, and they clean up the scraps and other leftovers from the predators. So maybe not one of the world's most attractive looking species, but vitally important to the ecosystem. Tarangire is one of the few places in Tanzania outside some of the parks further to the south, like Selous and Ruaha, where you stand a chance to see a wild dog. They're not common in Tanzania. They range over huge areas, but if you're lucky, we may run into a pack. Then from Tarangire, it's only a short drive to Lake Manyara National Park. It's right at the foot of the Rift Valley. Off to the right, we're climbing up the side of the Rift Valley walls up into the Ngorongoro Highlands, centered around a large lake, although it's actually very difficult to get to the lake shore itself. So we tend to focus most of our exploration on the bush and the mahogany forests around the edge of the lake. Again, fantastic bird life, fantastic wildlife here to enjoy. The southern ground hornbill, the largest hornbill species in Africa. Some nice mammals as well. From one of the larger birds to one of the smaller mammals. This is the little Kirk's dik-dik, which is common throughout this region of Tanzania. And if you're very lucky, Manyara is famous for its tree climbing lions. And both Manyara and Tarangire, if you're very lucky, you can find a pride of lions resting in the heat of the day up in the tree, which is quite unusual behavior for lions because they're typically a terrestrial species. And then from the lake, we climb up this Rift Valley wall and into the fabulous Ngorongoro Conservation Area. This is the entrance to the reserve, and you drive up through montane woodland, montane forest, up to the ridge, and this is where you get the fabulous view out over the Ngorongoro crater, one of the great natural wonders of the world. 3 million years ago, the crater was an active volcano, and then the volcanic caldera collapsed in a massive explosion, forming the crater we see today. And it's about 20 kilometers across, 600 meters deep, and so just you'll never forget the experience of driving up over the ridge, over the rim of the crater, and then just looking down at this fabulous view before you. We stay in some really nice lodges in Tanzania. We use a mix of permanent lodges and temporary tented camps on our tours. This is the Sopa Lodge at Ngorongoro crater. So you've got really nice accommodation, and you're right on the edge of the crater rim here. So you can sit out in the garden to the heat of the day, or paddle in the pool, and you've got this fabulous view out over the crater. And this is quite typical of a lot of the lodges that we use. We always choose lodges that are in a fabulous location for the wildlife. The great thing about the Sopa lodges is only a short drive from the descent road that takes you down into the crater rim itself. Along the edge of the crater, the montane forest, are some really lovely birds. The fabulous golden-winged sunbird is one of the key species to find here. The commoner scarlet-chested sunbird. On the crater floor, there are thousands of mammals. It's just a fabulous wildlife spectacle, as well as a scenic spectacle. Huge herds of buffalo are commonly seen. There are elephant down in the crater here. You don't get big numbers of elephant, but you get some really big bulls and some big tuskers. There are no giraffes, because the giraffes haven't managed to make it down the very steep sides of the caldera. Plenty of zebra as well, and a few wildebeest. You can see the big five in the Ngorongoro crater. One of the rarest of all animals now in Africa, sadly, is the rhino. He's a black rhino, but there's a healthy population in the crater, on the crater floor, and they're frequently seen. In the center of the crater, there's Lake Magadi, full of flamingos, other water birds. Really lovely spot just to go and relax and have a drink and a snack. And you're overlooking the loads and loads of lesser flamingos and other birds along the water's edge. So the bird life in the crater is absolutely fabulous. Crowned cranes are common in the on the crater floor. There's barely 10 minutes where you're not seeing flocks of these really graceful birds. Equal in size, the Kerrie bustard, one of the world's heaviest flying birds, again often seen out on the crater floor. If you're lucky, maybe a couple of chicks, as this one's got. Some special birds for the keen birder, rosy-throated longclaw, quite a difficult bird to see in much of East Africa, but they're common down on the crater floor. And if you go in the migration period, so February, March time, you get huge numbers of wintering birds that winter in southern Africa, move up through Tanzania, and they stop over and feed in the crater on the way further north. So when I was there in March, there were hundreds of thousands of swallows, all feeding and wheeling over the lakes. Lots of yellow wagtails, wheatears of various varieties. There's always lots and lots to see. European roller is another fairly common bird throughout this region of Africa. This is big cat land as well, since there's so much prey. There's lots and lots of lions on the crater floor. I only put this image in to illustrate that it's actually possible to avoid the crowds. The crater can get quite busy at times, but we know where to go. We know the times to go down to avoid the big numbers of people. Most tourists actually have a nice leisurely breakfast in their hotel on the crater rim, and then they go down to the crater floor, getting down there at about 9 o'clock-ish or something like that. But the crater floor actually opens at 6, so we make sure we're up early. We leave as early as we can, down on the crater at first light, and then you've got several hours almost to yourself down with very few other vehicles around. Same at the end of the day, most people go home mid-afternoon, but we hang around until the actual park closes at 6. And the first few hours of the first hour of daylight of the morning is just absolutely fabulous time. It's when the animals are the most active. You go down at 9 o'clock in the morning, the lions are lazing around on the ground, sunning themselves, and first thing they're out hunting. The birds are singing as well. Rufous-naped lark is a common bird throughout the region. And after a few nights in Ngorongoro, we move out and descend out of the crater highlands onto the short grass plains of the Ngorongoro Conservation Area in southern Serengeti. And this is one of the most fabulous, spectacular wildlife spectacles anywhere in East Africa. The wildebeest migration, they take a clockwise route, moving from the Masai Mara in October, November, down to the short grass plains of the southern Serengeti between December to May. We time most of our Tanzania holidays for the January, February, March period, when all the wildebeest are crowded down onto those short grass plains to the south of the reserve. And then the wildebeest and the zebra make their way back round to the Mara over the course of the rest of the year. So they're following the rains, and they're following the rains and the new growth of grass down in the southern Serengeti to mate and give birth down there. Over 1.2 million wildebeest make this annual migration, and they're joined by 250,000 plain zebra, similar number of Thompson's gazelle. So it really is one of the most fabulous wildlife spectacles anywhere in the world. So loads and loads of plain zebra. We use a variety of camps in the Serengeti. So we use some permanent lodges, and we also use some tented camps, such as this one. This is Ndutu Kati Kati camp. Very comfortable tents. They're set up only for a few months of the year when the wildebeest are down in the southern Serengeti, but it's a wonderful way to be out in the bush and away from everybody else. Lots of gazelles. These are Grant gazelles. Wherever you get the concentration of game, you've got the predators. Lots and lots of lions down in the Serengeti. This is also the land of the cheetah. The big wide open plains of the southern Serengeti are the areas that the cheetah favour, and you stand a very good chance of seeing cheetah on this trip. But when I was there a few years ago, we were exceptionally lucky and had a cheetah come to see us, sat on the front of the vehicle and just remained there with their cubs for about 20 minutes or so. But cheetahs like to get up high, and from there they can scan over the plains, looking out for predators and their prey. And the other big cat, the wonderful leopard, is also seen frequently in this region. If you're fortunate, maybe even serval. And I would say, all the trips we do to Africa, we get the most serval sightings on our tours to Tanzania, not just in the just in Serengeti, but also in the Ngorongoro crater as well. A beautiful, very sleek feline that's quite elusive and difficult to see. And wherever you've got the predators, you've got and the prey, you've got the scavengers as well. Spotted hyenas are very common throughout this area. And the avian scavengers, the wonderful lapid-faced vulture and Ruppel's vulture. In the evening, you might be lucky enough to see bat-eared fox. They like these very open grassy plains, and there are a couple of dens very close to the camp at Ndutu Kati Kati. And so the birds, again, you can only really touch the surface of the birds because there's so many down here. The wonderful secretary bird is a common sight, a very majestic, stately bird that feed on snakes. So they hunt down the snakes, and then they will stamp on the snake's head to kill it. And from the big down to the small, wonderful white-throated bee-eater, just one of a variety of different bee-eaters and colourful rollers, hoopus, hornbills, barbets. Well, just the list just goes on and on and on. So Serengeti, it's one of the most fabulous of all areas. And so at the end of our tours to Tanzania, as with all of our tours around the world, you're very welcome to extend them. Just put in a couple of slides just to illustrate a couple of the places we could take you on an extension to maybe up to Lake Natron, which is in the northern Tanzania, in the bottom of the Rift Valley. It's pretty hot and pretty dusty here, but the scenery is absolutely spectacular, and the wildlife is second to none as well. So you're looking at the active volcano of Old Lengai. This is where all the lesser flamingos breed, and you probably saw on David Attenborough's fabulous film Perfect Planet a couple of weeks ago, all the flamingos breeding in the center of Lake Natron. Whilst you can't get out to the center of the lake to see the breeding colonies, they're all often losing lots of lesser flamingos around the edge of the lake, and a wide variety of birds and other wildlife too. But it's just really the landscape here is just absolutely second to none. Or if you want to relax maybe after your time on a dusty safari, you could head over to the coast to Zanzibar, or maybe up to Kenya, and we'll book you a few nights at a beach resort so you can just take it easy and unwind after your time out on safari. So I will end my presentation there. So Tanzania is just an amazing place, got so much landscapes, birds, wildlife. So if you have any questions on Tanzania, please do either send it through on the chat function, or give me a call in the Naturetrek office. I will now pass over to Georgie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and good evening, everyone. If you don't mind just bearing with me for one moment while I just share my screen with you all. Right, hopefully you can all see me and see my screen nice and clearly now. So good evening, everyone. My name is Georgie Head. I am Naturetrek's TaylorMade Manager. For those of you who don't know much about our TaylorMade offering, we offer private bespoke holidays, very similar to our group tours in that they're all absolutely focused on the wildlife. We will always match you up with the very best wildlife guides wherever you choose to go. In terms of itineraries, we can be very flexible. We can do things which are quite similar to our group tours, or if there is a particular species that you'd like to see, we can go to some different national parks. We can do tours which specifically focus on photography, if that's a keen interest of yours. Really, we will just work with you to create a fantastic holiday as you'd like. We can design holidays for single people, for couples, for families, for groups of friends. So we can accommodate all interests really. So if you'd like more information about TaylorMade, please do take a look at the new TaylorMade section on our website, or alternatively, you might like to order our dedicated TaylorMade brochure, which has plenty of ideas and inspiration to get you started. But that's enough about TaylorMade. This evening, I'm actually going to focus on Zambia, which is one of my very favourite countries in Africa, and hopefully I'll inspire you this evening as I go on. So just for a bit of background, Zambia, as you can see here, is a country in central southern Africa. It's got borders with Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Malawi and Tanzania. So it really is in the heart of the safari district, and it combines really well with any of those countries. But it also acts really well as a country in its own right for safaris. And as you can see here, the country is well covered with national parks. Actually, a third of the country is covered in national parks, 20 national parks in total. I'll cover a few of those in a bit of detail this evening, but predominantly I'm going to focus on the South Luangwa National Park. So South Luangwa is certainly the premier game reserve in Zambia. It's got absolutely the most abundant wildlife. It's got a fantastic variety. So I'd certainly recommend it for any first-time visitor to Zambia. And for many people returning, I'm sure they'll want to make a second visit as well. So I'll just start off with this very classic view of South Luangwa. So the park is named from the Luangwa River, which runs straight through the eastern border all the way through the park. And during the wet season, this would be completely flooded right up to the top of those banks. So it does vary a lot throughout the year. but this is quite an iconic view. There's so many elephants throughout South Luangwa. If those of you who have visited Botswana or Tanzania and seen elephants there, you might notice that the elephants of South Luangwa are actually a bit smaller. They're actually believed to be a subspecies of forest elephant. So although they might be smaller in size, there are great numbers, and you will get these fantastic views pretty much anywhere you go. So South Luangwa is predominantly known for its leopards. It actually has Africa's highest naturally occurring density of leopards. And on a safari in Zambia, in South Luangwa, you're likely to see leopards almost daily, I would say. The numbers are truly incredible. So we might see them up in trees like this. They actually drag their prey up to the trees with them. So you might see half a puku hanging out as well. Or we might track them as they sort of scour the gullies, as they stalk their prey. But the guides we work with are absolutely fantastic locating these gorgeous predators. They look for all the possible signs. They will just listen to a puku bark or a bird alarm call and will be straight on the hunt to search for these amazing predators. Leopards aren't the only draw of the park though. These are Thornycroft's giraffe. So they are an endemic subspecies of giraffe. They're actually the world's shortest subspecies of giraffe, and they can also be identified from the fact that they have no markings below their knees, as you can see in this photo here. So as I say, they are an endemic subspecies and there are no captive populations anywhere in the world. So if you'd like to see a Thornycroft's giraffe, you're going to have to head to Zambia. They're not the only endemic subspecies though. This is a Cookson's wildebeest. So Paul was briefly talking earlier about the huge numbers of wildebeest that you see in the Serengeti. You won't see quite so many in Zambia, but this subspecies is quite special in that it's largely identifiable from the fact that the markings on its face and neck are much more predominant than other subspecies. Crayshaw's zebra is another near endemic subspecies. So they can be quite easily identified from the fact they've got much thinner stripes than some of the other zebras that you might find. You can see that quite nicely in this picture here with the oxpeckers. And I spoke earlier about the leopards, but they're not the only big predators of the park. Zambia is actually not a big five game, sorry, South Luangwa is not a big 5 game reserve. Sadly, rhinos were poached to extinction in the 1990s, but you can get all 4 of the other species of the big 5. Lions also occur in great numbers. There are a few sort of celebrity lions, I would say, that returning visitors and local people are really keen to see. There's actually an older pair of males called Ginger and Garlic, who they used to dominate in the park really, but sadly, a couple of years ago, they were chased away by some younger males, but occasionally they can still be seen on the other side of the river. And returning visitors are always very, very keen to see these 2 big personalities. They're not the only predators though. Wild dogs can also be found in South Luangwa. So for a while, probably back in the 1990s, if you spoke to any of the guides, they would expect to see them maybe only once or twice a season. They were very, very elusive and there really weren't many in the park. Whereas I'm pleased to say that nowadays their numbers are greatly increasing, and probably if you were going to spend a week in South Luangwa, you'd be lucky if at some point you didn't see some wild dogs. You'd be unlucky, sorry, if you didn't see some wild dogs. They really are amazing creatures, absolutely not guaranteed. We always feel so fortunate when we do see them, but we're delighted that the sightings are becoming more frequent, as they're absolutely magnificent animals to watch. So people often ask us about the type of vehicles that we use on our safaris, and in South Luangwa, we only use these open-sided Jeeps, which are fantastic for photography and also just make you feel a lot more immersive in the safari experience compared to when you've sort of got glass and doors between you. So they're a real draw of the park. It's also worth noting that in South Luangwa, there are no tarmac roads, which again is very important for photography, and again just gives the park a bit of a wild feel to it, more so than in some other African national parks. So now onto the lodges. This is Kafunta River Lodge, which is one of our very favourite lodges in the park. We use this for both our group and tailor-made holidays. For our tailor-made guests, we have some families who return almost annually. They request the same guides, the same rooms each time. So I think that really is testament to the wonderful staff and wonderful lodge in itself. So all of the lodges really in South Luangwa are kind of very similar in nature to this, in that they are made of natural materials. They blend in very, very well with the natural environment. There are no big lodges, which means that actually the number of tourists into Zambia is much lower. So you don't, again, get those big groups of vehicles. It's really quite an exclusive safari destination, which is lovely. There are no really gold tap luxury type lodges here, but personally I think the real luxury comes from just being in this amazing environment and being constantly surrounded with such wonderful wildlife just right on your doorstep. So this is Three Rivers Camp. This is a sister camp of Kafunta, and it's one of the many bush camps, which are generally only sort of 3 or 4 rooms, so even more exclusive than many of the lodges. They're semi-permanent, so at the end of the season, all of the infrastructure just kind of washes away and leaves absolutely no environmental impact whatsoever, which is so important. And these bush camps are particularly popular with people who would like to do walking safaris. Now, walking safaris are a key attraction of South Luangwa, and they have been for many years now. They're widely known as the home of the walking safari. So this is a picture of pioneering conservationist Norman Carr, who first started walking safaris in the 1950s. At the time, hunting was very common, but he had the idea that people might like to go and photograph the wildlife and see it rather than hunting it. And he did so in his walking safaris. And this is something that carries on today. So nowadays, walking safaris are more likely to look like this. You will go out with your guide and also with an armed scout. You might be lucky enough to come across some giraffe whilst you're there, but really they're not focused on seeing so much of the big game and predators. And instead, you'll focus on seeing the smaller inhabitants. You might spend time looking for the tracks and scats and signs of wildlife. You might learn more about the vegetation and the general ecosystem. And it just gives you a really good feel for how everything works. So the Luangwa Valley is really good for walking safaris because there are no steep gradients. Although you might be out for around 4 hours every day on a walking safari, you're not really walking for all that time. So it's certainly not arduous walks. Most of the time you'll just be stopping and enjoying the wildlife. So it's a really great place for walking safaris. People also ask us about a typical day. So generally this will begin at around 5 a.m. You'll be woken with a hot cup of tea or coffee and have a light breakfast, possibly some cereal or toast, and then you'll get straight out on your walking safari or game drive, which usually lasts around 4 hours. Then you'll come back for a brunch. It might not be brunch as we think of it. It's largely a main meal, really. Can be several courses. It always amazes me how wonderful the food is in these really remote bush camps, and the fantastic variety and freshness of what they're able to produce. But as you can see here, you do not want to be away from your binoculars for even a single second, because at any time when you're eating your lunch, the wildlife can just roam straight across those plains, and you're always ready for action. We'll generally then have a few hours rest during the heat of the day, largely because that's when the wildlife is also resting and hiding, so it's not a particularly productive time. but many of the camps have these nice lookouts and viewpoints so that you can continue to watch wildlife. This is Kakuli Camp, which is another one of our favourites. Then you'll head out on your afternoon game drive at around 4 p.m. And have a couple of hours, similarly to in the morning. But around 6 p.m, the sun will set and we'll get one of those glorious African sunsets. And for a few minutes, we'll just stop and just listen to the hippos wallowing and just the silence of Africa. It's one of my very favourite times of day. It's a gin and tonic in hand or a glass of wine, all very, very civilised. And we'll just take a few minutes out to just stop and enjoy this wonderful spectacle. But we don't stop for too long because the action certainly doesn't stop there. We head out onto our evening game drive. So South Luangwa is particularly popular because they allow nighttime game drives and spotlighting, which isn't usually possible in many of Africa's national parks, certainly not in the main parts of the reserve. But the evening game drives are so productive. The lions and many of the predators are much more active at night. So we might get to witness a kill or something equally exciting. There are also many inhabitants which are exclusively nocturnal. We might hope to see the porcupine or spotted genet, or any of the other 60 mammals who occupy the park, many of which are nocturnal. So this really opens up a completely different door for us. It's not just about the mammals though. Anybody who watched David Attenborough's Perfect Planet documentary last Sunday will be very familiar with the southern carmine bee-eaters, which featured in the last episode. So these arrive in South Luangwa every August and generally stay until around October time, and they occur in these colonies of tens of hundreds. And my personal favourite thing about them is just the spectacular colours that they really bring to the region, the crimsons and blues. They're much brighter than the northern carmine bee-eaters that you might find in Tanzania or elsewhere. So they usually come in August to October. People sometimes ask us the best time to visit South Luangwa. So generally the dry season is between June and October to November, and it starts to get hotter over that period. So for those people who aren't too comfortable with hot temperatures, I'd certainly recommend visiting earlier in the season. But the benefits of travelling later on is that as it gets hotter, all of the water holes start to dry up even further and water becomes a lot more scarce in the park. So the wildlife congregates around the fewer and fewer remaining watercourses and becomes much more concentrated in those areas and therefore easy to see. Temperatures do rise up to about 40 degrees in late October, so certainly not for anybody who is averse to high temperatures, but it is certainly a lovely time to travel. It's also worth visiting in the green season between December and April, particularly for birders. This is a red bishop who throughout much of the year is just sort of a very unobtrusive brown looking bird. But as we get into the green season, it brings out this spectacular breeding plumage, which a lot of the birds do in South Luangwa. You also get the northern migrants, so it's a really lovely time to visit. This is an African pitta, which is another popular bird for keen birders. It can be found near Flat Dogs Camp, which is another of our favourite camps. So that brings me to the end of South Luangwa. I'm now just going to cover a few of the other national parks in a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So we'll continue on with North Luangwa, which, as its name suggests, is further up the Luangwa River. This is Mwaleshi Camp. So North Luangwa is actually much more inaccessible than South Luangwa. Many of the parks can only be accessed in the dry season and are totally inaccessible in the wet season. So Mwaleshi is one such example, and it can only be accessed by flight or by walking safari. So there are no game drives whatsoever. This particular camp is comprised of only 3 tents. That's quite typical of a lot of the camps in North Luangwa. So it's perfect for families or groups of friends who want to hire out something exclusively. So I would certainly say that North Luangwa is for the more intrepid amongst you, but for anybody who wants to get completely out and away from everyone, it's a really lovely choice. So moving on to the Lower Zambezi National Park. As its name would suggest, it is in the lower part of the Zambezi, and most of the activities that we will enjoy here are water-based. So this is a cruise that we might take by silent electric motorboat. In the Lower Zambezi, we're likely to see lots and lots of elephants, even more than in South Luangwa, and they are huge, the elephants that we do find here. We also have the opportunity to take canoeing safaris in the Lower Zambezi, which isn't usually possible in South Luangwa. South Luangwa have an extraordinary number of hippos that can make canoeing safaris quite dangerous. So much more safe and relaxed to take these in the Lower Zambezi. It's not all about the water-based activities though. Game drives are also possible. I would say that there probably isn't quite the variety of wildlife in the Lower Zambezi that you might find in South Luangwa or some of the other parks, but the wildlife they have in great abundance. So it combines really nicely with South Luangwa with the different range of activities on offer. So moving on to the Kasanka National Park, again, anybody who watched David Attenborough's Perfect Planet programme should be well familiar with Kasanka and the straw-coloured fruit bats. So these amazing species arrive in Kasanka each November for a period of around 4 weeks. So 10 million in total, the entire world population arrive and congregate in an area no bigger than 2 kilometres squared. So it really is a fantastic spectacle. It's actually the world's largest mammal migration, so it's even bigger than the Great Migration in Tanzania that Paul was discussing earlier, and really is something very, very different and very exciting. Moving on to the Bangweulu floodplains. Some people might visit Bangweulu for as it's the only site to find black lechwe. They're completely endemic to this area. But more people will probably be familiar for its the fact that shoebill stork can be found there. It's probably the best place in the world to see shoebill stork, and between the months of May and July, we will take out dugout canoes or banana boats and go and see these fantastic sort of prehistoric looking birds. So there are so many more wildlife parks in Zambia that I would love to cover, but sadly 20 minutes isn't quite enough time. So I'm going to finish this evening by just speaking a little bit about the Victoria Falls. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the fact that Victoria Falls sits between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And a lot of people will choose to stay at one of the very luxurious hotels right at the top of the falls. This is the Victoria Falls Hotel. It's one such example. But most of our guests actually prefer to stay at one of the sort of smaller, more remote lodges on the Zambezi. Still very easy to access the Victoria Falls, but here you can just relax, you can enjoy more wildlife. We can take sunset boat cruises in search of birds and plenty of hippos. This is Waterbury Lodge, which is one of our very favourite lodges in the area. So many people ask the best time to visit the Victoria Falls. A lot of people would like to visit sort of when they're in their absolute full flood, as they think that's when it's going to be the most exciting. Generally, I would say that's probably not my favourite time to go, mainly because there is just so much water at that point and so much spray that actually makes the visibility not very good. So you can't get those great photos that you might expect. And travelling sort of further into the dry season, you can often actually see a lot more. There's also plenty to do in the dry season. You can go to Livingston Island, or for the real daredevils amongst you, you might even like to go to the Devil's Pool, where you can hang off the side of the falls. Certainly not for everyone. But that brings me to the end of my presentation on Zambia. I hope I've inspired you. If you've got any questions, please do send them through to us. We'll try and answer them throughout the evening, but we'll also answer some at the end of the presentation as well. So now I will pass back to Sarah. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Fantastic presentation, and thank you so much, Paul, as well. Stunning images to look through there, really just wonderful. We're going to go to a short break now, just over 5 minutes. So we'll be back at 8:25, where we will resume the rest of the evening. So you've got time to go and top up your drink and pop the loo, and we'll be back in just over 5 minutes. Thank you. welcome back everybody. I'll now hand you over to my colleague David Phillips, who is going to take us to Namibia. Over to you, David.
Lovely, thank you very much then, Sarah. I'll just bring up my presentation. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, so, well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And thank you to Sarah there and everybody else, all of my colleagues there too, who've given some lovely speeches tonight. I'm going to talk now about Namibia. This is a country that I've been very fortunate to go to for the last couple of years. Although I manage tours chiefly in Europe, I started working on some Namibian tours a couple of years back because I have a great interest in astronomy as well as in wildlife. And so I developed a tour to see some of the wildlife during the daytime, but see some stars at night. But I'm going to talk tonight generally about Namibia as a country. So first off, let me bring up the slide. Well, I would do, bear with me just a moment longer. I might need to just unshare for a second and bring up the slide again. Terribly sorry about this, just bear with me. Lovely, okay, sorry about that. I think it's just a glitch that I seem to have on this particular laptop. So Namibia, right, okay, so we've already heard about Tanzania and Zambia, so now we're moving across to the Atlantic coast of Africa, the southwestern part of Africa, just north of South Africa and south from Angola is the country of Namibia. It's a vast country, a very country about the size of well, three and a half times the size of the UK. So it's a very large country, but it has a minute population by the standards of anywhere in Europe. It actually only has a population of 2.5 million people, so only about 1/30 of what we have in the UK. So it's very sparsely populated, and that's because it's largely a desert or semi-desert country, so it can't support large populations. But there are people, there are population centres in the capital, Windhoek, Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and a few other small towns around about. But the thing about Namibia that I find most exciting is that when you're there, you're driving around and seeing vast open spaces and wide vistas and big landscapes, because there's so few people living in the country. Our tours start and finish in the capital, Windhoek. The flights are usually either via Amsterdam with KLM or via Johannesburg with BA or South African Airlines. And we arrive into the capital, Windhoek, and right in the centre of the country. We have 4 different tours which take in various parts of Namibia. 3 cover sort of fairly similar routes, which I'll chiefly be talking about this evening, and the fourth trip, which is the Namibia, Botswana, Zambia tour, is one that I won't actually be talking about in any great length today, because it goes on through Botswana into Zambia, and we will in fact be dealing with Botswana on another evening. But nonetheless, this is one of our most popular tours, in fact, covering the 3 different countries. The tour on the right of the screen here is the one that we've just had established for many years, the Etosha Pan and Skeleton Coast tour. That starts in Windhoek and goes up through Etosha, out to Damaraland, and then down to the coast, and then down to the sand dunes in the southern part of Namibia, or the southern central area, before returning to Windhoek. And this is a very popular circuit covering the real highlights of the country. In addition to those tours, we've recently, however, developed 2 other tours which are slightly more specialist, covering a similar route to the Etosha Pan and Skeleton Coast trip, but these trips focus on a different aspect to Namibia. One is our night and day program, and this is one which, whilst we enjoy obviously all the wildlife and bird life during the day, but we also spend some of the evenings doing some astronomy, looking at the glorious, clear, crystal clear skies down there in the southern hemisphere, the Milky Way, and many other features of the night sky down there. And then the second tour, again on the right-hand side, the map there depicts the route followed by our photographic tour. And this one, again, similar route, although it actually goes further south down to Lüderitz as well, but it picks up on a number of places where photographers are particularly keen to see, such as the Quiver Tree Forest and parts of the dunes, and visit some of the dune fields at times around the sort of sunset, sunrise times when they're most suitable for taking magnificent photographs. But on both of those tours, really, the main emphasis is on seeing the wildlife. These other aspects, the night sky and the photography, are probably more sort of sidelines, really. But nonetheless, very sort of people are very keen to pursue these kind of interests there too. This is the vehicles or type of vehicles that we use down in Namibia. They are Toyota Land Cruisers that have been specially kitted out at the back with seating and the pop-top roofs. We only have enough. We only sell enough seats in the vehicle so that everybody has a window seat, so that you can slide that window down. You can see the windows down the side of the vehicle there. You can slide the window by the side of you down. But also when we're in the national parks, you can and stationary, we can take that lid up and view the wildlife while standing up, as the people are in this image. So I was going to start talking about Etosha and then move to the more southerly areas of Namibia. Etosha is a fantastic national park. It's the premier park in Namibia, opened as a national park in 1967. It covers a very large area. Its area is greater than that of Wales, and the centre of the park is a huge salt pan that is a result of evaporation of a lake that was once fed by rivers flowing in from the north of the country. But all around that salt pan, there are, and around the periphery of the park, are a number of water holes, some of which remain filled with water throughout the entirety of the year, even through the dry season. And these are what attract the great numbers of animals. And I'm not going to go into great talk about all the different species that you see up in Etosha, because a lot of the animals that you see there are very similar to what you've been seeing pictures of from Georgie in Zambia and from Paul in Tanzania. But there are all the major mammals there, from giraffes, southern giraffes there. There are zebras, you can see the waterhole, but both common and mountain zebra. Springbok are very, very common. Larger mammals such as the black rhino is probably one of the best places, in fact, in Africa to see the black rhino is in Etosha. They are frequently seen around the waterholes there. And in fact, Namibia has about a third of the world's population of black rhino. It also has a healthy population of elephants. So you see large herds of elephants as you drive through the park and through many other parks within Namibia. In addition to that, there are all or many herbivores, such as the wildebeest there in the top left. Down in the bottom left, it's the springbok. And in the bottom centre there is an impala. Impala are very, of course, well-known species throughout Africa. You see them in many national parks throughout many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. But actually, the species that they have in Etosha is the black-faced impala. You can see the two males there squaring up have a much darker face, and this is a subspecies of impala that is only found in western part of Etosha. The little Kirk's dik-diks. Paul mentioned Kirk's dik-dik over in Tanzania. They're also in Namibia. The top right is perhaps my favourite antelope, and this is the Hemsbok, or it's the southern oryx, but the Afrikaans word is the Hemsbok. And they're seen very commonly right across Namibia. Beautiful, sort of almost painted markings on the animal. Really lovely. An absolute sort of arid desert specialist. You'll see them standing out in the middle of the most dry, arid area in full sunlight, seemingly unfazed by the intense heat. Bear with me a moment longer while I have a sip of water. And of course, where there are herbivores, there are carnivores. These are, again, the stronghold of the cheetah is, in fact, Namibia. and a third of the population of the planet's cheetah are resident within Namibia. The wide open plains, the acacia plains, are really its home territory, and you see them in Etosha and in other parts. You can visit the Okonjima cheetah sanctuary and go and track them there with the guides, but in Etosha you can see them wild there as well. The leopard down the bottom left, that in fact is in Okonjima. So that was a sighting that we had where it's a collared individual that we were able to track down and find. But again, they're seen up in Etosha, and the lion up in the top left, he was at one of the water holes in Etosha. So there are plenty of carnivores there to be seen as well. But it's not all about mammals, of course. As we've said with many of the other countries, the birds also take a prime seat in the sort of what people want to see in Africa. And this actually, rather oddly, came as a surprise to me. This particular image that you're seeing here is the communal nest of a sociable weaver. And if you're traveling around in Namibia and some parts of northern South Africa, you may come across trees or even telegraph poles with huge, great, almost like haystacks draped across them. I was, when I first visited, I was not familiar with the species. I'd seen it on television, but didn't really expect to see them down in Namibia. But in fact, they are quite a common sight there. And indeed, if you look up from underneath those sort of haystacks, you'll see the little holes, and you may see, like the image on the right there, a sociable weaver peering out. And this is the largest structure of any bird that any bird has made. And it may be up to 100 pairs of sociable weavers might be breeding and nesting within one vast nest, which can weigh up to half a ton. But also there are lots and lots of other birds. You don't need to be a full, hardcore birder to appreciate the bird species and the loveliness of some of the birds that you see out there. This is just a selection of some birds that I saw on my last trip out to Namibia. The bird in the top left, I think, came as it was a real treat to see. This is a shaft-tailed whiter, and these are birds which during out of the breeding season are quite dull and small and almost like a sparrow. But during the breeding season, the male develops these phenomenal long tail plumes, which are 30-40 centimeters in length. And this is a striking bird to see. In the top right, you have some rosy-faced lovebirds. And this is actually in the nesting area of a sociable weaver. So they've actually taken up residence in the sociable weaver's nests there. But they're a lovely bird to see. Down in the bottom left, we have the crimson-breasted shrike, a beautiful, really vividly coloured bird, and very commonly seen around the camps, the water holes, and around the country generally. And in the bottom right, we have the violet-eared waxbill. Again, a gorgeous little bird. None of these birds here are uncommon at all. They're birds that you're very likely to see driving around. And really, they are stunningly coloured, and there are so many other birds. It's hard to do justice to the avian life in Namibia. But I'm going to move now from Etosha in the north across to the area which is often referred to as Damaraland. It's where Twyfelfontein is centred, and that is an area which is become very, very famous now for having tremendous petroglyphs. In the stones in one valley there are carved thousands and thousands of petroglyphs of animals and warriors, and these have been carved by local tribespeople over the course of millennia. So for probably 5,000-6,000 years, these have been carved out in vast areas of it, and it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this is a very interesting area to visit. As I say, it's about a half a day's drive south from Etosha, southwest. The local Herero tribe are the people in the area, and the lady there in the bottom right-hand in the right-hand picture is a member of that particular tribe. Whilst you're in that area, this arid area, you might start seeing some plant life. If it's rained at all recently, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, you get fantastic blooms of flowers coming out. This is a devil's thorn in the top right, and the bottom right is a southwestern edelweiss, not related in any way to the European edelweiss, but a beautiful, delicate little flower that had come into bloom because there'd been a bit of rain a few weeks prior to my visit. On the left-hand side, this is for the botanists. This is Welwitschia mirabilis, and that's a very, very special plant indeed. It's one that's not only it's endemic to the Namib Desert, so to Namibia and parts of southern Angola, but it's actually a plant that is really evolutionarily distinct. It's not only a member of just of its own genus, but more than that, it's actually the sole member of its family and indeed its order. So it's a plant that's diverged from other plant species many millions of years ago. And although it's not a great looking plant, it's a real interest plant. And that particular specimen is actually on the side of a petrified tree that you can see there going away into the distance. And this is quite an interesting site that you might visit on our astronomy tour, in which there's quite a number of trees all laid out that were deposited after a great flood about 270 million years ago. The geology in Namibia is really very, very interesting. The openness of the landscape, the lack of vegetation in many areas really means that you can appreciate the local geology very, very well. And in that area of around Twyfelfontein, you also go looking for the desert-adapted elephant. These are very commonly seen around the camp itself, and sometimes within striking distance of the club, the lodge that we use there. These elephants are the same species as the African elephant, but they are adapted for desert life. They have wider feet for coping with the sort of going around in the sand. They're slightly longer of leg and smaller of body. And I believe they even have a slightly adapted kidney for dealing with having less water available to them and having to survive and make use of the water that is present there. So that area in the Kunene region in the northwest of Namibia, leaving that behind and dropping south towards the coast, we come to the second principal town of Swakopmund, and to the south of that, Walvis Bay, that you can see on the map there, on the coast, on the Atlantic coast. Swakopmund is a very interesting little town. It's often a quite refreshing place to visit after you've been out in the sort of arid regions, because it's down on the coast. It's got a much more moist sort of climate, and it's got an interesting architecture. It's got quite nice shops, quirky shops, bookshops, and also some excellent restaurants and particularly fish restaurants there. But we use this as a base for doing some trips out to the coast, out from the coast, I should say, and on our Etosha and Skeleton Coast trip, we have a boat that we take out from Walvis Bay out into the bay there, but also further out into the open water, where because the result of the Benguela current, which feeds cold water up from the Antarctic, it's very, very rich in marine life. So we have within the bay area, you commonly see bottlenose dolphins there in the bottom left. There's an interesting population that's being studied there at the moment. It's very much resident in that coastal waters of Namibia. A key species that people are keen to see is the Heavisides dolphin. That's the one in the top left, a really quite small dolphin, only about 1.4, 1.5 meters in length at maximum, so a very small dolphin. But these are an endemic species to that particular part of the ocean off southwestern Africa. The great white pelican there are seen everywhere. In fact, you can see on the picture of the boat in the center, there are many pelicans that come actually onto the boat. And down the bottom right, you have a mola or sunfish. There's a lovely sight in the waters. And occasionally you might see African penguin as well. Lots of Cape gannets flying around. It's really a fantastic dimension to Namibia that people don't appreciate always, that you have this interesting ecosystem off the coast there. And in addition to the species we just talked about, there's a large colony of South African fur seal. Further up the coast at Cape Cross, there are hundreds of thousands of them, but down in Walvis Bay, there are many hundreds of them out on the spit. So they are another interesting species to see. As we then head south from Swakopmund, we then go back into the sort of desert type landscape, and we start to see the quiver trees. This is an icon of Namibia. This tree isn't actually a tree, it's a member of the aloe genus, and the San Bushmen of this area, of the Kalahari, used to use this tree to create a quiver for their arrows, and that's why these are called quiver trees. And they're really quite stunning trees to take, and very, very photogenic. Moving slightly further south, we cross the Tropic of Capricorn at around 23 degrees south, and stop to have your photograph taken, as many people have done in the past, as you can see by all the stickers on the sign there. And then we're heading towards the area of Namibia, which is dominated by sand dunes, and that is around the Sossusvlei area. This is one of the dunes there. This is dune number 45, and we can climb up to the top of it and enjoy a full day of driving around and seeing different aspects of the dunes there. There are salt pans in between, areas that have dried out, where trees are then left high and dry with no water. So these Acacia aerolobus trees actually died about 700 years ago, but are almost like petrified there in the well, not petrified, but they're desiccated there in the sand dunes. One bird of great interest in that particular area is the dune lark, the only true endemic for Namibia, but that's quite easily seen in and around the dunes in Sossusvlei. And around the dunes, come the evening, you also might see some other interesting species, such as a scorpion there that's illuminated in ultraviolet light, a gecko, and at the bottom there is a hairy-footed gerbil, an animal I was particularly keen to try and see a couple of years ago when I was down there, and we managed to locate one of the evenings out in the dune fields. At night, once it's actually gone dark, as I was saying, it really is a tremendously beautiful night sky that you see from Namibia. There are very few people about, there's no light pollution to speak of, and you have the glorious southern Milky Way, the Magellanic Clouds, and you may have chance, if you go on a photography trip, to take the photograph of them of the Milky Way rising behind these quiver trees in the quiver tree forest area. And if you go on our astronomy trip, you'll also have opportunity to spend a couple of nights in and around a special ranch there that has a telescope, a sizable telescope, very, very modern, up-to-date telescope, and do some astronomy with that. And on that trip, we also have access to other optical equipment that we use throughout the course of the trip, as well as visiting this particular site to do some astronomy with that particular telescope. So that wraps up my talk for Namibia. I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have, and if I'm not able to answer them straight away on the chat tonight, please do email me or phone up the office and we can have a chat about it. But I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague Kerrie, who's going to talk about Madagascar. But thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, David. Thanks for your lovely talk on Namibia and your images. That was wonderful. So let me fire up my presentation for you all. And we're going to finish off the evening with 20 minutes on one of my favourite destinations, which is Madagascar. So my name's Kerrie Porteous. I'm one of the operations managers at Naturetrek. I've been with the company since 2012, and one of the very first things I did when I joined Naturetrek was jet off to Madagascar to co-lead one of our tours there. I look after countries from north of Sweden down through the middle of the Alps in Europe, Ethiopia, down to Madagascar, all over the place. But Madagascar is one of the few that I've been lucky enough to return to a few times. And I spent a few months out there actually after I finished university. So I love it. It's got a special place in my heart. And I'm delighted to share some bits and bobs about the country with you now. So let's set the scene a little bit to begin with why Madagascar is such a special island to visit. Well, it's not only the 4th largest island in the world, it's also the oldest island in the world. So I don't think I have a pointer that I can use, but if you were to look at the very top map there, the 225 million year ago map, you can just about see Madagascar jammed in between the Pangaea and Gondwana supercontinents. And gradually, as those continents started to drift apart, so India sets off on its course to eventually smash into Asia and form the Himalayas, Madagascar is dragged away from the African mainland, but it doesn't follow India all the way. It just gets marooned with the Mozambique Channel in between Africa and the island itself. And that's been the case since about the time that the dinosaurs went extinct, about 65 million years ago. We know that there are a few relics of that old Gondwana community still on Madagascar. So there's some primitive ferns, some of the reptiles like the boas are from those times. But we also know from looking at the fossil record that the island has been fantastically enriched by species that arrived since Madagascar became isolated. So we are talking about extreme levels of endemism now. We're looking at 70% of the reptiles, 90% actually of all the amphibians that were in Madagascar endemic, 70% of all the plants, all the terrestrial mammals, half of the birds, nearly all the insects and spiders. So there's almost everything you see is special and unique, and you just won't find it anywhere else in the world. There's a theory that there might have been a land bridge about 40 million years ago that could have helped some of these pioneering species make their way across the Mozambique Channel and arrive in Madagascar. It always just sounds a little bit far-fetched when you think about a primitive mammal floating across a huge sea on a bit of leaf vegetation. I find it helpful to think in geological timescales, and if something isn't impossible, if enough time passes, and we're talking millions of years, eventually it becomes probable. So that could have happened, but a land bridge may have been there at some point as well. So to give you an idea before we start talking a bit more about our sort of tours and the wildlife you might see along the way, let's have a look at some of the different species you might find. So in terms of birding, well, Madagascar has got 6 endemic or near endemic families. So the cuckoo rollers, the acites, the ground rollers, the acites, the Malagasy warblers and the mesites, they are all found only on Madagascar itself. The cuckoo rollers and the bangers are only found on Madagascar and the neighbouring Comoros Islands. So we say that there's 6 endemic or near endemic families. And these are the bangers, which are mine and many people's favourites of all those endemic families. The top left is a sickle-billed banger. Locally, it's known as a crybaby banger because it flies overhead and goes wah, wah, as it flies over. The one below is the helmet banger, the epitome of bangers for most birders, that incredible blue bill. And then the one on the right is a real generalist, it's a Chabot's banger. So here it's on a Didieraceae plant in the spiny desert, but you get it all over. And the bangers, they were all descended from one common ancestral species that arrived on Madagascar. It was it found that there was no other sort of mid-sized insectivorous plants in existence. So it evolved to fill all the niches, and it's often likened to the Darwinian finches, but that just doesn't do it justice. Half of the world's chameleons are found in Madagascar. So top left is the panther chameleon, the largest and quite widespread in the north. An aptly named blue-legged chameleon there on the right. And then the one at the bottom is a Bruxia tuberculata, a tiny, tiny thing. You can see it's the size of a thumbnail. So you have to have a good guide and a good pair of eyes to find one of those, but it can definitely be done. And for many, it is the lemurs that epitomise Madagascar. We currently know there to be at least 106 species of lemur. If I look back through the Naturetrek brochures, the earliest mention I can find from our tours to Madagascar was that there were at least 36 species of lemur. So in the last 20 years or so, we have found a huge number more, and there's probably more to come still. These are all shipikers, so none of their ranges overlap. There's a Deccan shipika is the one on the left, cockerels, is the top right, found in the northwest of Madagascar. And then Perrier's shifica is the black one found in the very far north. Absolutely beautiful creatures. And then the smallest of the lemurs, the mouse lemurs, we used to think there was just one species of mouse lemur, and then we decided that there were two. There was the ones on the left, the brown mouse lemurs that lived in the wet forests, and then the ones on the right were the reddish grey mouse lemurs that lived in the dry forests. Now, looking at the genetics and having done much more exploration, we know there to be at least 20 species of mouse lemurs. And actually, genetically, they're very distinct. So again, there may be more yet to find. The smallest of all the primates, we think, lives in Madagascar, and that's in the smallest of all primates in the world, is the Madam Bert's mouse lemur, found in Kerrie forest in Madagascar. So I'm going to take you on a little overland tour for the next 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less, heading over Madagascar. And this is the good road of Madagascar, the RN7. It's the one good road, really. That's why we'd like to use it. Unfortunately for us, it does cover some fantastic habitats. All of our tours fly into Tana, in the middle there, and Tananarivo. And then we are going to have a look at two of the rainforest reserves, and Dasabé-Mantadilla National Park and Ranamafan National Park. We're then going to head over this high plateau that creates a rain shadow. So whilst the east of the island is very wet, it gets drier and drier as you go across. So we're going to head across that plateau, look at Isalo National Park, and then finish on the coast in Ifati, where we visit the Spiny Deserts. This is the sort of typical scene you see when you're setting off from Tana and heading out on your way to the first national parks. It's quite interesting to look at it because it looks quite Asian in appearance, with the sort of two-storey buildings and the paddy fields. And there is reason for that, because we know that the first people to arrive in Madagascar came from Borneo and Indonesia. They brought with them their rice farming and hence views like this. We also know very soon after, the Swahili-speaking people arrived from East Africa. And now there's somewhere between 18 and 21 different cultures across Madagascar, depending on how you classify them. So it is also a fascinating country culturally to visit, as well as in terms of the wildlife. Accommodation-wise, well, it's not bad. It's not fantastic. You don't go to Madagascar purely for luxurious accommodation, because it doesn't really exist. There's just the odd one out there. But on our tours, we stay in good accommodation with ensuite rooms, mozzie nets where they're required. It's comfortable. So yeah, it's not to be worried about. You'll be well looked after. And what's important to note is that the wildlife viewing is done on foot. So it's not like all the African safaris we've been talking about this evening, where you're in a safari jeep or open-sided vehicles or anything like that. We have buses to get us around. We'll drive to the start of the national park, and then we're out walking. So it's good to have some walking poles with you if you're a bit unsteady on your feet at times. But yeah, it means that you're really getting to know the wildlife. You're getting some fantastic views. You can stop to see everything along the way. We've got some great guides and trackers that are with us throughout. And we typically will go out as soon as the national park opens, whether that's 6, 7, 8 in the morning, depends when it is. Stay out for the morning, leisurely pace. We're not rushing, and there's so much to see that you can't get a quick march on at all. Come back for lunch, have a bit of relaxing time during the heat of the day, and then probably head out later, either for an afternoon walk or a nocturnal walk, or both. So we're in the rainforest now, and of course there is some excellent birding to be done. So let's have a look at those now. This is a Madagascar pygmy kingfisher. It's actually insectivorous, so you'll rarely find it around water. You'll find it in the trees in the forest. And this is a red-fronted kua. The kuas are another endemic in Madagascar, found around much of the central and eastern areas. And most of them are ground dwellers. They are filling the niche of pheasants and roadrunners that you would find elsewhere. This beauty is a pitta-light ground roller. So the ground rollers are one of the endemic families I mentioned at the start. All but one of them live in the lowland rainforests, and we'll meet the one that doesn't at the end of the talk this evening. plenty of chameleons to be looking for. This one's a Parsons chameleon, one of the more widespread chameleons. They're an arboreal species. They've got a prehensile tail to help them cling onto the branches. Sometimes they look like they're walking like leaves, jerking backwards and forwards. If you see them shooting out their tongue for catching their prey, it's an incredible sight. We love watching chameleons as we venture around. This chappie is a mossy leaf-tailed gecko. I again wish I had a pointer for you so I could help indicate where he is. He's head down, the eye is probably about slightly bit more than halfway down the slide, the mouth and then feet pretty central. I'm going to zoom in now. So they are absolute masters of camouflage. Hopefully you can now see that eye and the mouth and the little feet towards the top left of the twig. And there's geckos in Madagascar that pretend to be moss and lichen, like this one does. And there's ones that pretend to be dead leaves, like this one does. So this is a satanic leaf-tailed gecko, a Europlatus fantasticus. And again, you need to get your eye in, but your guides, I'm sure, will help you find one of these as you're venturing around the forest, spotting a bit of dead leaf for you. This little chap is a giraffe neck weevil. This is a good one as a tour leader because they're always found on the same type of bush because they like to use a certain leaf to lay their eggs. So if you know where the bush is each year, then you can head back quite easily and find yourself a nice little giraffe neck weevil in order to show the group. And this is a comet moth. Now these are big. This is the sort of size of my face size moth. Absolute beauties with these wonderful tail streamers. They are thought to act as a bit of self-defense, so that if a bird were to attack this moth, it will probably grab a bit of the tail streamer, which is not an essential part of the moth, and hopefully leave the rest of it to it. This little chap's a tenrec. So tenrecs are the endemic mammal in Madagascar. All the tenrecs, of which there are about 30 or so species, are again all descended from a single ancestor that arrived on Madagascar many millions of years ago. So now there are tenrecs that like otters, a bit like moles, a bit like hedgehogs like this one, like little shrews, like little arboreal mice. So yes, clearly this one is filling the niche of hedgehog. It's a lowland street tenrec that we find in the lowland rainforests. This is my personal #1 favourite lemur. This is the black and white rough lemur. I think I like it a lot because it's a little bit more elusive. It sits high in the trees. It makes you work a little bit to find it, but it's more than worth it if you do. Gorgeous fluffy things. They grunt like pigs, so that helps you track it down if you can hear those grunts. This is a particularly beautiful shifaka that we find in the rainforest reserves. This is a diademed shifaka. Probably the favourite of many is the Indri, a real star of the show. It's the largest lemur that's living today. They live in small family groups and they communicate with each other and with other family groups with these incredible eerie howls that they just echo through the forest. You can be in your lodge a mile or more away and hear the Indri howl. Sarah and I wondered whether we should put that on as the interval music today, but we weren't sure whether that would be a great idea. It might be a bit much. But anyone that's been to Madagascar and heard that Indri, they won't forget it in a hurry. A lemur that we haven't seen so far this evening, and to be honest, we're unlikely to see on most of our tours, is the eye. What you're more likely to see is this little hole that the eye has made. But there is a reserve that we go to on the east coast where there are habituated eyes. They live on a little island and they come to coconut feeders. So if you're absolutely desperate to see an eye, then have a chat with us. Our Madagascar Mammals tour is a good option because we visit this particular reserve. They are incredible creatures. They have big bat-like ears, rodent-like teeth to gnaw at the bark, and then that long skeletal finger to dig out grubs that are moving in the wood. You'll see that woodpeckers are notoriously absent this evening, and there are none in Madagascar, but we have the eye instead. And what a fantastic replacement it is. And then another fairly elusive creature that we only occasionally see, but have a much better chance on our mammals tour than any other, is the top carnivore, the top predator in Madagascar, the fossa. if we run maybe 12 standard tours to Madagascar in a season, maybe 2 or 3 of them might see Fusa, and it's just luck. You have better chance going slightly later in the season into November as they take up their mating trees. So a female Fusa will take to her mating tree for perhaps a week at a time, and she will receive several gentleman callers per day. One will leave, the other one will take over. She has great stamina. So that's a good option if you're really keen to see a Fusa, then heading sort of November time is your best bet. So heading across the island, as I said, it gets drier as we go over that high plateau. And this is a Sala National Park, so we're getting much drier by this point. And we visit these 2 canyons during our stay, the one that looks like the wine glass and the one that looks like the beer glass. The accommodation here is actually really very lovely. It's a good place to dry out after the rainforests, enjoy some good food. They've got a nice pool. It's a lovely lodge actually. So you have a nice couple of days here, and the birding in the grounds in the morning is absolutely dreamy. So we'll get up for anyone that wants to, just after sunrise, go for a little wander, and we're likely to see Madagascar hoopoe. We might see Madagascar kestrel. This is a Madagascar paradise flycatcher. You get a sense that birding in Madagascar is actually very easy. There's just one of everything. You say Madagascar before the name, and then you've got yourself an endemic. This is a Madagascar bulbul. This is a Madagascar magpie robin. This little chap is actually not a Madagascar something. It's a forest or a Benson's rock thrush. We often find it on the roof of the lodge where we're staying. And this is the first place where we'll catch up with the iconic ring-tailed lemurs. They're the most sociable of all the lemur species. They live together in large family troops with maybe up to 25 individuals and an alpha female in charge. We tend to go, well, we go to, most of our trips will run from September to November. The reason being that's a good time weather-wise to go. It's a very good time birding-wise to go, and in terms of the lemurs, they've all had their babies in sort of July and August, and by September, October and into November, the little baby lemurs are all starting to get a bit excitable, learn how to bounce through the trees, leave their mums' backs a little bit, so they're an absolute delight to watch as well. There's another Shifuka to be found here. This is a Vero Shifuka, and I'm sometimes asked how close you can get to individual lemurs or groups of them. And it really just depends on the lemurs, but some of them are quite inquisitive and will come really close. And they'll come and have a look at you, in fact, and check you out. And the result can be a fantastic photo opportunity. Lots of other weird and wonderful things, of course, to look at, as in all places in Madagascar. This is a Pachypodium, an elephant's foot plant that we'll catch up with in Asalo. And as we continue across the island, it's getting drier and drier, and we'll start to see some baobabs. So 6 of the 9 baobabs of the world are endemic to Madagascar. This is an Adansonia za baobab. We'll stop along the way in a place called Zombitse Vohibata National Park for this little chap. It's an Apis tetraca. It's found in 1 forest fragment in the entire world. So if you want to see it and have it on your bird list, then you need to stop at this forest fragment. Early morning is best, and we'll do that on the way to Spiny Desert, where we visit next. And this is where we end up on the coast. So again, more baobabs. This one's an Adansonia ruprostipa, and you can see the footholds going up there where people have been going up to find the fruit. Lots of these crazy Didieraceae octopus trees as well. It's just a place like no other. It's hot, so we get up early and go out just as the sun comes up, but it's absolutely gorgeous. There are a couple of really prime birds we'll be looking for here. The first is that one ground roller that doesn't live in the rainforest. It lives in the dry, spiny desert, and it's this one. It's a long-tailed ground roller, absolutely beautiful, and we'll make a special effort to find it during our stay here. And the other is this one, another of the endemics. It's a sub-desert mesite, and it's a dream bird for a tour leader because its defense mechanism is to freeze motionless on the branch. So you can send your guide in first thing, find the bird, it will freeze, and then you just walk your group up for some fantastic photos, and everyone heads home to breakfast very happy indeed. And that's where Route Nationale number 7 finishes. So from here, you do have to take on Air Madagascar. This is the departures and arrivals board at Tuliar Airport. We ask you just to place your trust in us when you travel to Madagascar. Know that flights rarely go on time, but they will go. And we will keep in touch and make sure that you're on it when it happens. I've just covered a few of the reserves and the sort of the main starting route, but there are other amazing places to visit as well. And with a few short internal flights, you can visit all sorts of other incredible parts of the island. I don't have any more time to talk about them now, but if you have more questions, want to find out anything about Madagascar, then yeah, you can stay on now. We've got our question and answer session coming up now. Drop us an email, give us a call, and I'll be delighted to chat further. Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you very much, Kerrie. Fantastic. So we'll now go to some questions. I'll open with a common question that we get asked quite a lot, and I'll put this to the whole panel. You may wish to nominate someone to answer it. Do the African safaris that we run cater for vegetarians and vegans? Paul, would you like to take that one?
I'll take that one. Happy to do that. Certainly not a problem catering for vegetarian. We get a lot of vegetarians on our tour, and all the yacht lodges are very used to catering for vegetarians and will produce great vegetarian food. And really, and veganism is also becoming commoner these days, and most lodges can also cater for vegan diets as well. We do, if you do have a vegan diet, then it's probably useful for us just to contact the lodge just to be doubly sure. But yes, we can cater vegetarian and vegan and most dietary requests.
Thank you, Paul. Does any other members of the panel wish to add to that for their countries they've spoken about? No, okay.
Paul, really? Yeah.
Yep, that's fine, great. Jenny Edwards asks, what are the temperatures like in Zambia, and are there many mosquitoes and other biting insects?
Should I take that one? Yeah. So thank you very much for your question. So I would say temperature-wise, you're probably, if you're traveling in the dry season, it probably starts at around 25 degrees around June time, I would say. And then towards the end of October, it gets really up above 40 degrees. So yeah, very, very comfortable, certainly at the beginning of the season. In terms of biting insects, I think it kind of depends where in Zambia you're going. In South Luangwa, I personally haven't ever had any issues. I know Kerrie's visited in the green season and similarly didn't have any issues then. So all of the lodges will have mosquito nets. So yeah, you're well protected. If you head down to the Kafue National Park, the tsetse flies can be a problem there. So there are more enclosed vehicles there. But in South Luangwa, certainly I've never had a problem personally.
Thanks, Georgie. Next question. This is from an anonymous attendee. For the small camps, do you still offer single occupancy accommodation, or do single travellers have to share?
We can usually offer single occupancy at most camps. There may be the odd exception to that, where there's a very small camp, maybe with only 3, 4, 5 rooms, and quite often then the lodge will charge quite a hefty single pot supplement, sometimes double the price. But yeah, normally we can offer single occupancy on the majority of our trips. In Tanzania, though, for example, we can offer single occupancy, but the lodges put a limit on us for only two rooms. So once those 2 singles have gone, then whilst we'd love to offer more single rooms, the lodges won't actually allow that. So if you particularly want single occupancy, get in quickly and book early.
Thank you, Paul. Georgie, another question for you from Michael Peterson. Where was the best place to see shoebill stalk and when?
So certainly the best place in Zambia is the Bangweulu swamps, and we recommend visiting between May and July for the very best chances. But I would also recommend tuning into our East and West Africa presentation, as it's also possible to see shoebill in Uganda, in the Mabamba swamps there. So yeah, if you want a different chance, please do tune into that presentation as well.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. We have a question from Rob, who asks, how much driving is involved in Namibia? David, that one's for you.
Yes, well, there's a fair amount of driving involved. It's as I've said, a very big country, and a lot of the sort of the highlights are unfortunately quite sort of widely separated. So it's offshore right up in the north, and Sossusvlei is fairly far south. But nonetheless, I mean, the roads through the main part of Namibia are very good. Only going to sort of like corrugated dirt roads, you know, in the sort of more peripheral sort of areas. So you can actually, the driving times are not so great. And you always stop, of course, for regular stops in villages as you pass, or to look at wildlife or the scenery as you go along. So you're not sort of sat in the vehicle for endless hour after hour by any means. There's always stuff to stop and have a look at. But yeah, there are some fairly longer. There are one or two drives that are probably, you know, 4 or 5 hours in length.
Okay, thank you, David. Kerrie, a question for you from Alan Woodward. Using your crystal balls and assuming the clients have been vaccinated and tested negative before travel, other than the UK and Europe, which destinations do you think will become available first?
To be a sidekick in the times of COVID, eh? So I thought I might actually cover this question, and there's two others which I think also slightly fall under the crystal ball gazing tab.
Would you like me to read those out, Kerrie?
Yeah, or I can summarise them as I go.
Oh, fine. Yeah.
Should I do that?
Yeah.
So for Alan's question first, well, interesting. I think we would probably guess that the same destinations that were opening up in the autumn when things were looking a bit brighter then are likely to be the ones that come back first. So outside of Europe, that being the Caribbean, we're all very keen to have us back and have had low cases. I would add to that now the Middle East, where vaccinations are ramping up quickly. And then in terms of if you were specifically asking about Africa, again, there were countries in Africa that were opening up again in the autumn, and actually it wasn't so much that they didn't want us coming in, it's just that our Foreign Office was still advising against all travel basically to the continent. So that was what was stopping us from travelling. But there were countries in there, and I have to admit that there's been so much changing. I can't remember specifically which ones, but I'm pretty sure that Kenya and Tanzania, perhaps Botswana, I can't remember.
Namibia was definitely open,
but there was open
getting to Namibia because you had to go through South Africa, which again might be a problem going forward.
Yeah, but I would probably guess that those ones will be the first to want us back, and the ones that are most keen for tourism, really. So the other two crystal ball-y sort of questions that I've seen come in, there's one on the Q&A section who's been asking about, says that he's got friends in South Africa, Kenya, and Malawi, and they've reported of the South African variant being detected in those countries. What might that mean for our tours and joining one of our African tours? And then there was another chat in the question, sorry, in the chat about, I think it was to do with having a sort of a COVID passport. From Peter Pilbeam, it was given the reported probability of various airlines and countries requiring a COVID passport, proof of vaccination or negative test. Has Naturetrek got a view whether Naturetrek will require one for its trips? So, good questions. I'd probably start off just by saying that this evening is about inspiring you for travel when it's safe to do so. We've been waxing lyrical about lovely places all evening, but we're not expecting to be back there next week. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome, and there's a lot that's going to change between now and when we do start running tours again. So it's very difficult for us to give you a direct set answer right now when there's so much that we're still waiting to find out and see play out. It seems quite likely to us that people are going to be requiring a vaccination to join tours, and whether that's because we as tour operators take that decision, we haven't yet. It's something that is on our radar, and we know that others are starting to talk about it. It's quite likely that countries will require it, as they do now. You know, many countries require a yellow fever vaccination certificate to enter the country, or an exemption certificate if you can't have one. That could well be dictated by, you know, lots of different countries around the world as the condition of entry. So yes, you would need one then to join a tour. We have to see what happens with travel corridors. There's none at the moment. So we have to wait for that to restart again. What happens with quarantine arrangements, testing on departure, testing for return to the UK. So there's a lot that has to change. So making a decision right now would basically be futile for us. We just have to make a new decision in a few weeks' time, and then again after that. So we wait and see. What I would say is that we will only be running tours when it's safe to do so. So if there is a South African variant spreading like wildfire around Kenya, we won't be going to Kenya. The Foreign Office is not going to say it's safe to go whilst that is happening. So we simply wouldn't be running tours there at that point. That's the sort of easy answer to that. And yeah, that applies to any country really. And I said much will change still. We will just try and keep positive, keep dreaming of where we can go when we can get back there. It will happen, and like, the travel industry is resilient. We love problem solving as an industry. We do it all the time, day in, day out, no matter what. So we'll get there. But yeah, I'm afraid it's not a straightforward answer right now.
Thanks, Kerrie. Another question for your crystal ball, which is really quite similar, but I'll ask it because at least 4 people have asked.
Right.
Several people booked on Madagascar, were booked last year, have transferred to go this year, looking to go October time. What is the possibility of being able to go this year?
Oh, in all honesty, I just don't know. I think we'll all be vaccinated probably. It depends a bit what's happening in Madagascar at the time. It's really hard to know. I'm very happy for anyone that's booked just to send me a message, and I can give you a call to have a chat about it. Might be better. We'll be open and flexible on your bookings for sure. But yeah, it's a fingers crossed job really, I think, for now, and yeah, wait and see.
Oh, well, Peter Pilbeam has just messaged to say I got vaccinated today. So, well, congratulations.
Oh, well done, Peter. You'll be fine.
yeah, you'll be fine. Great. We've had another dietary question. Do you cater for gluten-free diets? But the question does not specify for what country. So I'll put that out to all of you. Or Paul is our Africa specialist and expert, head of Africa, if you want to answer that.
Yes, most lodges will cater for a gluten-free diet. But again, like with a request for vegan diets, we do normally check with the lodge. So if you do require a gluten-free diet, let us know. We'll double check with the lodges on the trip and report back. But yeah, normally that sort of thing now, again, it's quite commonplace. So can usually be catered for.
I'd probably just add to that in 8 years of working for Naturetrek, I have yet to tell someone that we can't cater for their diet in any country. Sometimes it will be limited, and that's, we will have one of Paul's tours, a poor Botswanan chef trying to cater for 3 different diets on one campfire on an evening, but they'll do it. And it's just, it could sometimes be limited depending on where you are and the resources available and the supplies. But yeah, there's almost no diet that will say no, can't be done.
Thanks, Kerrie and Paul. Kerrie, another question which I think you could handle from Joanne Iredale. What's the situation with deposits? If we book for 2021 or 2022 now and it's cancelled due to the COVID situation, do we get refunded? Yes.
So there is a full update on our website. So I'd encourage you to have a read through that. It outlines your options. If we cancel the tour because of government advice, whether that's the Foreign Office saying don't travel there because of quarantine arrival, for whatever reason it's not safe to go, we'll cancel the tour and we'll offer you a full refund or the option to transfer whatever you paid to us, be it the deposit or the full balance, to a future departure. So yeah, have a little look on our website because it's all outlined on there as well.
Thanks, Kerrie. Paul, one for you. This is from Paula Reed. I'm going to Tanzania in January next year and know that plastics are banned. How restrictive is this in reality?
It's not a problem. It's not that much of a problem as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I need to look into that a bit more. But yeah, it's not ever been a problem reported to me by any of our group members.
I'm assuming, just to jump in, is that the same as for example, arriving in Kenya, that they have a plastic bag ban. If it's the same situation, it essentially means don't wrap up your DEET spray in a plastic bag in your luggage, because that could cause you problems. In reality, it's very unlikely to, but just don't take the risk. Just don't put anything in a plastic bag in your luggage, and once you're there, you can't get one. So that's all it means, really. You can take reusable bags, or like a canvas bag or anything like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kerrie and Paul. Question from Suzanne Weaving. Do any of your guides have botanical knowledge, and will you do the Drakensberg botanical trip in the near future?
We do have some very good guides with excellent botanical knowledge. The Drakensberg tour is one I'm hoping to bring back again in the future. That's been led over the past few years by David Tattersfield, one of our most experienced botanical guides, based in the UK, but he knows his botany all around the world. So yeah, we're going to be bringing the Drakensberg back in the not too distant future. We do a botanical tour down to the Cape region of South Africa, focusing on the flowers in the South African spring up in the Namaqualand, again led by excellent botanists. So yes, we do have botanical leaders as well as leaders who know their birds and mammals.
Thank you, Paul. We have a question from Peter Bailey. Do you need a yellow fever jab for Tanzania?
Yes, you do. And you will need to take a certificate with you as well, because you will be checked on arrival at Arusha Airport. So yes, you need either to have a vaccination certificate, or if you're unable to get the jab, then you need to have an exemption certificate with you.
David, a question for you. What are the accommodation options for Namibia, please? Can you just talk us through what the accommodation's like?
Okay, the accommodation in Namibia is typically very, very good, very high standard. And all the places that we visit on our tours are a very, very high standard indeed. I didn't actually sort of address that much in my talk because I was trying to cover the sort of locations that we go to. But yeah, some of the sort of finest hotels and lodges that I've been to have been those that are in Namibia. They're all sort of en suites. They're often little sort of blocks out in a sort of you have a central sort of area within the park, and then you have sort of spread out of sort of lodges throughout the park that you go to. So it maybe it's that sort of setup where you're in your own little sort of bungalow, as it were. Or if you're in the town, for instance, in Swakopmund, we often use the Hansa Hotel there, which is a really lovely old school sort of hotel in the middle of town there, very sort of, dare I say, colonial sort of early 1900s sort of hotel there. So that's very, very nice. But yeah, they're all of a good standard, really. And where we don't always use accommodation within the park, in the case of Etosha and down at Sossusvlei, because the accommodation often within the park is not the same quality as those that are just outside the entrance gates, because they're run by, the ones in the park are run by the government. Is pros and cons, because if you're inside the park, sometimes you have sort of earlier access to seeing animals, but sometimes in some instances, particularly in Etosha, the accommodation isn't so good. So we stay sort of, as I say, just outside the entrance gate in the sort of lodges that are set up there and are privately run. But yeah, they're all of a good standard.
Thanks, David. And a nice comment from Adrian James, who's backing you up there and says, just to confirm, having been to Namibia 3 times, accommodation is really good. If you're considering Namibia, just go. Thank you, Adrian. Kerrie, a couple of questions for you on the helmet vanga.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have tours to the habitats of the helmet vanga, and is the helmet vanga only possible on the extension?
Right, so the best spot to see helmet vanga is in the far north of Madagascar in Massawa National Park. Now, we don't run our Northern Madagascar tour as a group tour at the moment because the air route to get there was just so incredibly unreliable, it just didn't work. So we do it as a tailor-made option. If you want to go to Massawa, there's a really nice lodge which has its own private flights which do actually go, that get you in and out. So that's a really good option if you're interested in tailor-made travel or a tailor-made extension. it is pricey. It's one of like the 3 really nice lodges in Madagascar, and it's a private flight, so it does add up. We also have another site nearish to Andasave Mantadeer National Park, which is where I was talking about it at the start of the trip, start of my talk. Now it's quite intrepid. It's like a really, really bumpy bus drive for 4 hours and then quite an epic walk. So we offer that on our endemic birding tour for those that want to do it. And if you really want to see a helmet banger, then it's possible. I would also qualify that with that we haven't been there for the last year. And if that nesting site, if those birds have moved on, then we'll have to find a new one. But they are in that area. So if you are desperate to see a helmet banger, please get in touch, and there are ways to make it happen for a variety of budgets, but it's not easy, and you've got to want to see one, but it's worth it.
Thanks, Kerrie. We have a question from Tony Sinnott. What are the medical services like in Africa if someone develops a fever or has traveller's diarrhea? Paul, can I put that question to you?
Yes. Most areas that we go to, we can easily evacuate people out of lodges or camps if necessary. It's incredibly rare, but even in the midst of the middle of Botswana, you're not that far from help from doctor, or there's also what they call the flying doctor service out there, so they can fly you out of the camp to the nearest town for medical help. So yeah, it's Africa, of course. It's remote. You not have as easy access to medical facilities as you do here in the UK. But yeah, it's very, very rare that we ever have any difficulties. And on the rare occasions people have become ill, then they've been looked after very well.
Thanks, Paul. Kerrie, your plastic bag chat has sparked off some more questions. Perfectly valid questions, though. I think if countries do not allow plastic bags, how do you fly when the UK requires liquids to be in hand luggage in a clear plastic bag?
Oh, this is a really good question. I can't remember the answer to it. Georgie, do you know? You're looking like you know the answer to this.
I personally would just say, just take the clear plastic bag, but then just leave it on the plane. Don't try and get off customs with it. I'm sure they wouldn't stop you just for that. But personally, I just think it's just safer to just empty it out of the plastic bag, and then you don't risk any problems when you get out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. Paul, a question for you from Patricia Francisco. What are the chances to see aardvarks and pangolins on any of your Africa trips?
Right, well, the place to go to see aardvarks is South Africa, the Kimberley area in particular. We do a trip called South Africa's Rare Mammals, and to date we've never missed seeing aardvark on that particular tour, touch wood. Pangolins are another matter. They are tricky in South Africa. We've had a couple of groups that have seen them by chance, but the place to go to see pangolins is Ghana. We now run a new trip called Pikathartes and Pangolins, and to the West African country of Ghana, and I would say that's the place to go. They're quite widespread throughout much of Africa, but they are very difficult to see. I'd say Ghana is the place to look at.
Thank you, Paul. And do have one more question from Ian Hamilton asking, are the participants required to wear masks while travelling inside the vehicles and within lodges during meals, etc.? Kerrie, you were answering pandemic related questions.
Can do more. I can see there's a couple of pandemic questions going on here. So the one from Ian, it's going to be down to local requirements. So yes, I think at the moment a lot of African lodges are the same as here, really, that you wear it as you go in, you take it off when you're eating, that sort of thing, and it will just follow whatever the local guidance is and the local requirements are. So likely yes for now, see what happens in time. So do you want me to say that the other pandemic question I can see on the Q&A from Patricia whilst I'm on?
Yeah, please do.
It's another, not sure, but if the government doesn't provide vaccines on time, and private vaccines aren't an option. I assume this is in relation to if it's a requirement for travel, what's our situation? If you're booked on one of our tours and that becomes a situation, I'd encourage you just to get in touch with us and discuss your options. Again, it's a real unknown at the moment because we just don't know how fast that vaccine program is going to progress and what those requirements might be in terms of tours or countries. We'll always be as flexible as possible, and we want you to travel when it's safe for you to do so and when you're confident to do so. So I just encourage you to get in touch with us really if you're booked on a tour, and that looks like it's going to be the situation later in the year, and we'll discuss all the options with you.
Thanks, Kerrie. And another one for you. This is from Catherine Dodd. There is plague in Madagascar. What precautions are recommended?
Nothing above usual hygiene, really. That there is plague in Madagascar. There's plague in the United States of America. It crops up from time to time where there's years that are worse than others. And at that point, the UK press loves to talk about bubonic plague spreading like wildfire across Madagascar. When it's always there, and it is there every year. It's endemic to small rural villages mainly, which we don't visit. So if there is an outbreak there, we won't be going anywhere near. It's also treatable with antibiotics. That's a good thing to remember. About 4 or 5 years ago, possibly, there was a bigger outbreak, possibly more recent than that, actually. I've just lost all track of time. And that was one of the years when the BBC was loving it, and it's cropping up in the news quite a lot, and people were getting quite concerned. But again, our tours ran without any sign of plague anywhere. I think a lot was learned from the Ebola outbreak, actually, and it was really well controlled and contained. And there was no spreading to tourists or anything really about that. So yes, it is there, but it's always has been and probably always will be. And we don't expect you to be catching plague on our tours.
Thanks, Kerrie. A question from Edith Brosnan. In Etosha, do you stay in the park or outside the park?
As I say, it does vary depending upon which tour we do. On the Etosha and Skeleton Coast trip, we do stay at Okonjima there. So we stay at the park just on by the southern gate there. So we stay inside the park. In that instance, but some of the other tours, for instance, the astronomy tour, there we stay just outside the park, and the photographic tour we stay inside the park on that one. So it does vary. If she wants to contact me directly, I can happily give the sort of information of the different lodges that we stay at, but it does vary according to which trip we're talking about, really.
Okay, thank you, David. Right, well, that's all we've got time for this evening. If we do have any more questions that we haven't answered, then we will just stay on for the next few minutes and type some replies to you, or you can always email us in if you think of anything after tonight, or please do just call us in the office. And a huge thank you to all of our presenters for joining tonight, and thank you all at home so much for listening. This is the 9th presentation evening that we've run so far. And if you've missed any, then don't worry, they are available to watch online. If you just hop onto our homepage, you'll see the main banner there, which takes you through to our webpage, and right at the bottom, all of the recordings of previous ones are there. And at the top of that page, it's full of registration links for you to sign up for all of our upcoming ones. So you can go and watch them at leisure. So we've got all of the new dates there as well, as I mentioned earlier, and they were up on the slide during the interval. If you'd like to give us any feedback from the presentation this evening, then please do just email us at info@naturetrek.co.uk, and we'll be very happy to read that. Finally, if you're a member of a natural history club or wildlife society and should like a Naturetrek speaker to deliver an online talk free of charge to your members, then please do just contact us and we'll be very happy to arrange it. We'll be back the same time on Tuesday evening at 7:30, where we'll be taking you to Central America, covering Costa Rica, Panama, Guatemala, and Honduras. We hope you can join us. We'll stay online for the next 5 minutes or so in case you've got any last-minute questions. But until the next time, take care and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.